For now, we're joined by Kelley Ford from thelines.com. He joins us. He always has some fantastic data, some fantastic insights, and I've really enjoyed seeing you pop up on my Twitter feed more and more. Kelley, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on. So, I guess just from the jump, if you can kind of explain to the listeners what you do on Twitter, because it's a lot of data, it's a lot of numbers. So, just kind of like a quick synopsis, too long didn't read type of thing for the listeners.
Yeah, for sure. The too long didn't read is I make people mad on Twitter. That's essentially what I do.
So do we.
Right? No. So in all seriousness, what I do with the K Ford ratings is really twofold. One, I have the power ratings. So that is a predictive model algorithm that I've created, very similar to what Bill Connolly's SP Plus or Brian Fremeau's FEI, ESPN's FPI, any of those predictive power rating models that are out there. That's what the K Ford ratings is too. It's trying to project forward and say, okay, who would be favored against who on a neutral field if these teams played tomorrow? From those power ratings, I'm able to generate all sorts of different fun, in my opinion, things that go along with college football. So the most deserving resume rankings, I'm able to kind of look at every single team's schedule through a common lens and say, okay, how would the average top 25 team be expected to do against this schedule? And if you've done better than that, you're going to be up there in the most deserving. If you've done worse than that, then you're going to fall down in those rankings, right? And so the resume rankings are arguably my favorite thing that I do with the ratings. Again, I need the ratings to serve as the engine for that. James Madison, you guys will be happy to know, currently number 20 in my most deserving rankings. I mean, if I'm an AP voter, I'm voting for James Madison. I'm not, of course. I'm voting for James Madison because what the Dukes have been able to do this year against their schedule relative to what would be expected of the average top 25 team has been impressive. I can dive more into what that means and what I mean by that if you guys want. Other things that I do, though, projected conference standings. So basically, let's simulate the rest of the year using the current power ratings. Where do these teams end up? What percent chance do they have of winning 5, 6, 7, 8 games in the conference? What percent chance do they have to win 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games in the regular season? Right now, I have JMU with a 4% chance to finish the year 12-0. Also, on top of that, I've started doing game leverage stuff. So, hey, this game this weekend, what does it mean? The JMU Georgia Southern game. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any Sun Belt championship game leverage for James Madison since the Dukes are ineligible, but this is a huge game for Georgia Southern, right? If they win this game, they have a 55% chance to win the Sun Belt East. If they lose it, it drops all the way down to a 34% chance. So that's another thing I'm able to do. We track on who's overachieving, underachieving relative to preseason expectations. There's all sorts of fun stuff that I do on the website, KFordRatings.com, but it's all driven by the power ratings.
Dope. I know
Wow,
you just
really, really impressive stuff with your stats. I know you've posted several times to Twitter and to much outrage of plenty of different fans. But how do you, as a, again, unbiased, removed third party that just is presenting statistics, kind of like sit back and look at these fan bases and go, wow, they really don't know it's just numbers. They're getting angry at me of all people. What fan bases do you find the most fun to interact with? Obviously, the Dukes have shown you some love recently, but
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, JMU fans have been fun recently. You guys are newer to FBS still. So when I started doing this, James Madison was not an FBS program. I've now, of course, created my FCS light model, so that helps me better approximate the team strengths of FCS teams. But when James Madison was FCS, I didn't do that. I didn't have that. So I'm newer to the James Madison fan base. There are some out there. The Utah fan base seems to be pretty good. You know, they like when you pump up their team and they don't get too mad when you say things that aren't as nice about their team, or when the numbers say things that aren't as nice. Tennessee, surprisingly, people are like, wow, that Tennessee fan base, there's no way. They're actually pretty good sports about it for the most part. Again, for the most part. But then there are others who, maybe not as friendly or not as nice or don't understand as much about what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish. People don't understand. It's not personal. Like, sometimes my favorite team doesn't come out smelling like roses in the model. Sometimes it does. Like, I'm not bringing any Kelley Ford the person spin here. It's just what the model says, and that's how we do it. But there's a handful of good fan bases out there that are fun. And guys, I'll be honest, when I first started on Twitter, 5, 6 years ago now, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I tried to respond to everybody and react to everybody. Hey, they've got a question or they're yelling at me, but they don't understand. Let me explain it. I've moved past that. People
Yeah.
don't want to understand. So if someone asks a genuine question and I do have time to respond, I certainly will do that. But those that are just kind of yelling and screaming, "Oh, this sucks. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, your math is wrong." Like, thank you. I appreciate it. Mute and I move on.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
Yeah. You just dropped
Awesome to hear.
something earlier today, the net wins in one possession in overtime games. The what if Wednesday, I think you call it. One of my favorite things that you do. JMU leads everything, every team in the nation with 4 of their 5 wins this season coming by one possession / overtime, but none of them have been to overtime, just all one possession games. So just all of their FBS wins have just so happened to come that way. When that's factoring into the overall numbers, does that hurt a team? Does it bring it down? Because honestly, I was kind of shocked that the ratings had JMU as high as 20th when they have that many one possession wins.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's twofold there. From a power rating standpoint, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're winning by one possession if the opponents that you're playing are really, really strong. Now, if they're not, basically going into a game, the model has an expectation of your team and of your opponent based on all this data that I'm putting into the back end of the model. If you perform in the game, and it's not about wins and losses for the power rating model, it's about how did you play. If your team exceeds the expectation that the model had for you in that game, your power rating will rise. It will get better. If you fall short of the expectation of the model, even if you win the game, if you fall short of the expectation in terms of your performance, your power rating will fall. So it doesn't necessarily matter the win or loss for the ratings. It's all about how did you play relative to expectations. Now, that's how James Madison, for right now, for me, they're power rated number 62 in the country. They're 69th offense. They're 52nd defense. I mean, it's pretty darn good for a G5 program that's only been FBS now for year 2. So all of that aside, from a ranking standpoint, yes, you do get punished a little bit if you don't beat teams by as much as the model is expecting the average top 25 team to beat these teams by. Now you're winning games, and that's more important, but it's twofold with the most deserving. It's how have you done against your schedule relative to expected with regard to win-loss? That's what I call record achievement. And then how have you done against your schedule relative to expected with scoring margin? So that's my relative scoring margin. For James Madison, right now, you guys are number 17 in the record achievement component, which is the bigger component of the two. At the end of the day, it should matter more what is your record and what is your record relative to expected. Because we know, no offense to JMU, we know 12-0 in the Sun Belt is not 12-0 in the SEC, right?
Yes.
So we have to normalize that schedule, and we do that on the back end. But it's only a 62% chance the average top 25 team would be 5-0 against JMU's schedule so far. That's really good. That's number 17 in the country.
Wow.
I said JMU's number 20 though. So, well, Kelley, you said they're number 17. Why are they number 20? Because their relative scoring margin is dragging them down a little bit. Yes, winning these games by one score, the average top 25 team would be expected to beat these teams by much more than one score. JMU's relative scoring margin is minus 15.2. That means the average top 25 team would be beating James Madison's opponents by 15.2 points per game more than James Madison is beating those opponents. So that relative scoring margin ranks number 64. Again, you're 17 in record achievement, you're 20 overall, and you're 64 in the relative scoring margin. That's because the relative scoring margin is weighted significantly less than the record achievement. But I do think it's important to include that in there, because if you and I beat the exact same, if we play the exact same schedule, and I beat that schedule by an average of 50 points a game, and you beat that schedule by an average of 1 point a game, but we both end up 12-0, well, I'm more deserving because I beat the same teams you beat, and I beat them by 7 touchdowns more, right? So that to me is why it's important to incorporate that. ESPN strength of record is the same thing as my record achievement, but ESPN strength of record doesn't incorporate anything beyond just who have you beaten, how have you beaten, who have you beaten, and how would the average top 25 team by FPI be expected to have performed against that schedule. I think incorporating the relative scoring margin is really important.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the Dukes have just gotten the nickname Cardiac Dukes for a reason. We don't like to win a game by more than a possession. And at this point, I think our biggest margin of victory is 8 against South Alabama of FBS teams. Bucknell was a little different, but
Yep,
crazy to think that
that's
we've
right.
gotten away with it this much and this early into the season with one possession
Hey,
games.
look, I mean, if you stop the game after 30 minutes, I think JMU's would probably be number one in every aspect. I mean, I think they're a national champion contender after 30 minutes of football. But unfortunately, you have to play an additional 30 minutes, of course.
No
Yeah, our
doubt.
second half offense is not our forte.
Yeah. Well, looking ahead to this Georgia Southern game, I know you mentioned a little bit about it. Um, so JMU not eligible to make the Sun Belt Championship. Do you have the numbers of if they were eligible by chance? Because I think it'd be really interesting to see JMU's championship uh, likelihood if they were eligible. If not, we can just kind of focus on the game itself and how it plays in for Georgia Southern.
I do have that. Give me 1 second, guys. A JMU fan actually asked me that yesterday, and I went ahead and did the calculation. Okay, here it is. I found it. I said if JMU was eligible, JMU would currently have a 35% chance to make the Sun Belt Championship game. I'd have a 35% chance that the Dukes would win the East. If I look at I don't have their leverage. I didn't run the
Yeah.
leverage piece. But if I look at the projected conference standings right now up on the website, James Madison, I said you guys are power rated number 62. If you look at teams in the Sun Belt, you're right up there with the best of the Sun Belt teams in a power rating standpoint. You're the best, most deserving by a good margin. But from a power rating standpoint, I have South Alabama out of the West at 56. I have Troy out of the West at number 60. And then in the East, James Madison's at 62 and Georgia Southern's number 63. Those are the top four
Ooh.
teams in the Sun Belt by my power ratings right now. So James Madison is the best team in the East, one of the best teams in the conference, and their average projected conference wins is 5.7. That's actually best in the conference. 5.5 for Georgia Southern in the East with them, and then in the West, Troy has 5.6 and South Alabama has 5.3. So JMU, it truly is a shame that you guys are ineligible for the conference championship. I work in college athletics. I understand the transition rules. I understand why we have them in place. It's still unfortunate for the Dukes because I do think you guys are a really good team this year, and you're coming off of a year in which you guys had a ton of success, way more than my model thought you were going to have in year one. I learned a lot from JMU in 2022 that I was able to apply to new FBS newcomers this year, Sam Houston and Jacksonville State. Of course, we get Kennesaw State next year too.
Ooh.
So every year I'm learning a little bit more about how to deal with these FCS to FBS transition teams, but the Dukes have handled it as well as anyone, and I can't imagine anyone else handling it better in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Gosh, you said South Alabama was ranked 56th, you said in your perspective model?
In the power ratings, yeah, their
Gotcha.
power rating rank is 56. That's correct.
Gotcha. That Oklahoma State win carries a lot then, I'd guess. That was a 33-7 beatdown for them.
Yeah, South Alabama's power rating. So on the website, KFordRatings.com, I have all these team dashboards for everybody, and I keep track, and it's posted there every single week on the dashboard. You can see what was my team power rated, what was our most deserving ranking, all the different things I've talked about. It's tracked on there week by week. So if I look at South Alabama's dashboard, they came into the year number 69 in the power ratings. They were number 80 going into the Oklahoma State game. Coming out of that, they jumped to number 63. So they did experience a nice bump after that. Now they're up to number 56, so they've risen another half point since then. So yeah, that was certainly good for South Alabama. Now I don't think Oklahoma State is quite the team that we thought they were at that time. I think I had them power rated number 46 at the time of that game. They've now fallen to 55. So still a good team. And if they played again, Oklahoma State would be the favorite. That's another thing people get mad about. They say, well, wait, this team's already played. How do you have one above the other? I said, well, I mean, guys, it's sports, right? If you play the game 100 times, you're not going to get the same result. So I don't know. It's a fun thing that I hear about every single week. So yes, South Alabama, though, really good team for Sun Belt standards by my numbers. They're number 69 in the most deserving rankings, though. At 3-3, the average top 25 team would certainly be expected to be better than that against their schedule.
That's awesome.
Gotcha.
So before we let you get up on out of here, we appreciate all the time. Go ahead and plug away with everything that you have, because I think JMU fans will absolutely love where they can find all this information. But I know your model, looking at the JMU dashboard now, JMU, according to your numbers, a 58% chance to win this Saturday against Georgia Southern. They're a 2.5-point favorite, according to your line. If you were a betting man, Are you picking Georgia Southern to cover, or do you blindly go with your model?
I don't. What is the Vegas line? I don't even know.
I think it's 3.5 the last time I checked.
James Madison minus 3.5.
Yeah.
So my model. So I have to be very clear here. I mentioned I work in college athletics. Because of that, I am not permitted by
Good cover.
NCAA
Thank you.
rules to place any wagers on any sporting event in a sport that the NCAA sponsors. So college football, NFL, anything basketball, soccer. I mean, all that stuff's out of the picture for me. And I'm okay with that. I sports betting prior to working in college athletics, I went to Vegas a couple times with some friends and would do that. Like it takes kind of the fun out of the game for me because I'm sweating it and I'm trying to. I don't even want to deal with that, even if I didn't work in college athletics. But I don't do it because I do work in college athletics. If you were to use my numbers based on what's on the website and what you just told me about the Vegas line, my numbers would suggest that you would take Georgia Southern to cover because the Vegas line's 3.5. My numbers say it should be 2.5. So I would take Georgia Southern to cover, but with there's a 1-point difference there, not a ton of value. Now it does cross a pretty important number of 3. So sports bettors could look at that one of a couple ways, but I do think James Madison wins this game outright. Like you said, 58% chance to get it done. So listen, we get teams that lose games as 58% win expectancies all the time. You go back to, I think the biggest quote upset by my numbers this year might actually have been in week 1 when Texas State beat Baylor. I think I had a 3% win expectancy for Texas State, and people are like, oh, see, well, your model can't call that. You didn't think they'd win. Well, I said, well, actually, the best thing about working with predictive analytics and probabilities is I actually said there was a 3% chance that Texas State would win, and they did. So
I'm right.
you can never technically be wrong when you deal with probabilities, which is probably my favorite thing of everything that I'm doing in terms of me being able to defend myself, because it's so fun when people say, you were wrong. See, you didn't think this would happen. Well, I actually did think this would happen 28% of the time or whatever. So that's another way that I like to flip things around too, guys, is like right now, if you look at my chances to make the CFP, or earlier this year, I'd say, Texas has a 35% chance to make the CFP. And I'm just making up numbers right now, but everyone on Twitter would be like, there's no way. Texas is always overrated. You guys keep saying now they have, top 4 chance to make it. I like to flip that around and say, yeah, my number suggests there's a 35% chance Texas makes the CFP. Guys, that means there's a 65% chance that Texas doesn't. So it's more likely than not that Texas will not make the CFP. So that's another way to kind of flip the probabilities around, because when people see any ranking, they immediately just freak out about whatever it is. So you have to be very intentional about what you say, how you say it, and how you present the data, I've learned. But I think I'm on a tangent. I don't even remember where I was going. JMU minus 2.5, 58% win expectancy. I will say before I get out of here for you guys, if you look also on the Sunbelt team dashboard kind of page and you're scrolling through, that's where you get to the JMU page too. At the beginning, you've got the projected conference standings, you've got the conference championship game leverage. You also have the projected point spreads. That's an important one to look at for JMU fans, because right now, by my numbers, there's 7 games left, counting this weekend. My numbers do not project JMU to have less than a 50% win expectancy in any of their remaining games. You guys are a favorite or a pick 'em with a 50+% win expectancy in every single game. But 3 of those games, you're projected as a favorite by a field goal or less. Those are toss-ups. And 2 more, you're projected by a favorite between a field goal and a touchdown. So of your 7 remaining games, you're a favorite in all of them, or a pick 'em with a greater than 50% win expectancy. But 5 of those are projected as 1-score games. So you guys say you're the cardiac kids. You say you do this all the time. Well, I think there's some more of these games in your future as well. So just keep an eye on that. It's something to track for sure. But I've enjoyed being on with you guys. This was so much fun. Happy to talk JMU, Sunbelt, really anything college football anytime. You can find me on X at KFordRatings. The website's KFordRatings.com. And as you guys mentioned, it's on the graphic there. I'm over at thelines.com, doing a couple podcasts a week for them, doing a couple articles a week, just writing about, watchability ratings, which I didn't even really get into, and also compare and contrast my most deserving rankings with the AP poll. That's always fun as well. You can find those articles over at thelines.com.
Awesome. Appreciate the time so much. Learned a lot, and we're going to have you on then to talk watchability later on in the season. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelley.
Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.